Tradelands. The very title of this game portrays the reason for which we all play. For some, this game is about stealing from rich traders. For others, it is about building the best shop, filling it with goods and trading it to other players. But for many of us, it's about trading cargo across the Grand Isles. This journey to find the most profitable trade route, to build the most profitable trade ship, to become the wealthiest merchant is a constant evolving adventure. Where once the Atlas was the greatest trade ship of the Grand Isles, its long retired legacy now replaced by the Camel, whose many years of honorable service as the best trade ship in Tradelands has finally been met with a challenger right at the twilight of its own story. Today, a new ship seeks to take the honor, and that ship is the Albatross, a level 16 schooner whose faster design promises traders that it will bring forth a new era of profitability. In today's video, we will review the Albatross to try and confirm if it is truly the next greatest trade ship in Tradelands, or if the Camel will continue to maintain its legacy as the world's best trade ship through yet another era of the game. The schooner's success as a sailing ship has given it a long and successful career. Its story began as a coastal trader and a fishing vessel, whose versatile sailing characteristics made it a popular choice for mariners. Later, its seaworthiness and low crew requirements would make it a favorite for other professions as well. Despite modern movies depicting pirate ships as quasi-warships, in real life the schooner was the ship of choice. Even in wartime service, the ship proved incredibly useful. But by the 19th century, the age of piracy was coming to an end. And by the middle of the century, the age of sail was in its twilight, replaced with the age of steam and iron. And yet the schooner would continue its career as a merchant vessel and a transport ship, owing to its versatility and low cost. Many of the schooners in active service today are legacies from this last type of ship, which is arguably the most successful of all of the schooner's designs. And it was this last type of schooner, the fast trade ship, that is represented by the Albatross in Tradelands. With the Atlas having long been removed from the shipwright's register and the Camel now aged through many years of service, that the Albatross has come to take its place alongside its steam-powered counterparts, the Demeter in the series, to round out the Tradelands version of what trading looked like in the last half of the 19th century. The question we strive to answer today is if the legendary performance in real life holds up in Tradelands, or is it a sign that steam power will forever rule the ships of the late game? As always, we rate ships according to their statistical performance in-game, removing the human element wherever possible. After all, a pirate ship should be good at pirating, a naval ship should be good at combat, and a trade ship should be good at trading. If you are getting better performance than what we are showing here today, then you need to ask yourself if that's due to the ship's characteristics, perhaps instead due to your ability as the ship's captain. We rate ships in 3 categories. First, their performance as a privateer, which is an assessment of the ship's maneuverability characteristics. Second, by its combat performance, specifically in situations where it is expected to go toe-to-toe with other ships until one is sunk. And finally, as a performance as a merchant ship, measuring its overall profitability and comparison to other merchant vessels. First, we review its ability as a privateer. While the title portrays this as its ability to operate as a pirate ship, it's actually a battery of tests that attempt to identify a ship's hidden sailing characteristics and maneuverability mechanics. Strap yourselves in though, because this is a data-heavy section, and it involves a lot of comparisons to other ships. In fact, since the ship was branded as a side grade to the Camel, we are going to do a lot of direct comparisons to these two ships throughout this review. One key difference is the sailing speed of the ship, assuming that is that the in-game speed matches what's listed in the shipwright. The Albatross is a speed 9 ship, while the Camel is a speed 8 ship. This means that the Camel can be viewed as a direct upgrade to the Mule, which is also a Speed 8 ship, whereas the Albatross is a direct upgrade from the Grouse, which is a Speed 9 ship. In our performance test, we found that the Albatross's overall speed is almost identical to the Grouse, with only a few milliseconds of difference, owing to the longer hull design of the Albatross gaining a very extremely slight and completely inconsequential advantage when compared between the two. The crosswind performance was done between the Camel and the Albatross, and it slightly prefers the Albatross. Despite the speed penalty curve being nearly identical to the Camel, the Albatross is approximately 10% faster than the crosswind. This is most likely due to the ship's overall speed bonus, rather than an actual attempt to make the Albatross faster than the crosswind. So we're comfortable saying that the sailing characteristics between the Camel and the Albatross are really identical. This is further supported by the results of other performance tests we did. Juke and skid tests are all shown on the screen. However, we did notice that in the acceleration test, the Albatross seems to have a 2-second performance improvement over the Camel. While in normal sailing conditions this probably doesn't matter, if you are a type of trader that has to fully stop at a port when you buy and sell your cargo, then it means that the Albatross is 4 seconds faster than the Camel each time you stop. It also means that if you have to stop your ship to maneuver around a pirate ship that is attempting to bow lock you, the Albatross is more likely to break past its opponent than the Camel, as long as the helmsman had started their braking turn prior to pulling up their sails. However, a lot of this data is just irrelevant. Sure, it shows a marginal advantage when compared between the Camel and the Albatross, but the reality is that your opponent, such as the Bullet, Marauder, or Corsair, shown here as the early, mid, and late tier of pirate ships, are still performing significantly better. Don't be fooled into a false sense of security. Against dedicated pirate ships, both of these ships are still at a disadvantage, as shown on this chart. The only exception where the Albatross's superior performance matters is against a Corsair. In effect, the Camel is threatened by a Corsair, but the Albatross captain should not be. That's because the speed of the Albatross makes you faster than a Corsair, and has the hull points to resist its punishing broadside to the point where it can survive long enough to actually sell its cargo, as long as the Corsair captain cannot bow lock you and stop you. And that's the key if you're in a pirate ship going up against an Albatross. You really need to bow lock this ship quickly. If it manages to get past you, use chasers to try and scare the helmsman into making a mistake, such as veering into a slower crosswind position. But if not, you may be better off just giving up the chase and trying again later. All that said, if you are trying to operate the Albatross strictly in a privateering capacity, it's not going to be a very good ship. The capacity in which you will do this is probably as a mothership to a pair of raiders, and its fast speed allows you to pair with slightly slower interceptors and still be effective. But at the end of the day, if you have the choice, the Camel is the better option here, and it's the one that we will recommend. You see, the Camel is heavily armed, and it has coverage on 3 of its 4 sides, meaning the Camel doesn't need a defensive escort. Moreover, the one side where it doesn't have any coverage, the bow, that's also the side where ships are typically running away from you, not towards you. On the other hand, the Albatross has blind spots on its bow and stern, which aren't made up for with its maneuverability, making it the less ideal option in this specific case. That means, despite its overall statistical performance being better than the Camel, we still rate the Albatross as an F in privateering. Use a Camel if you're trying to operate this ship as part of a hunter-killer pack or as a mothership or any similar mission type where it can operate as a support ship. The next is combat. For this, we perform a series of 1v1 matchups where the only outcome can be the total destruction of one of these 2 ships. I'm pretty sure most of you already know where this is going, especially if you already own an Albatross. It's pretty typical that ships with no bow guns or stern guns do not perform well in this matchup. And with only a 3-cannon broadside, if you seriously expected this to go toe-to-toe with another warship, you should expect a lot of this. The ship is just bad at combat. I mean, our tests were exactly what we predicted would be the outcome. We run combat tests through the Tradelands Battle Simulator, an AI tool which takes the footage from our battles, analyzes it, and tries to make recommendations based on what it sees working and what it sees not working. And the result is pretty much get a better ship. I mean, head-to-head matchups aren't realistic for most players, unless you're in a pre-planned roleplay or skirmish situation. For most casual players, you're going to use this ship on a public server, which means you may or may not even see combat. I mean, it's a trade ship. The most common situation you're going to find yourself in is when a pirate ship intercepts you with the intention of sinking you rather than just boarding you and taking your cargo. At that point, you just have to make do with what you have and the crew you have available. And to that end, our best advice is this: don't panic. I mean, you are unlikely to sink anything of note with a 3-cannon broadside, so attempting to attack another ship will likely just get you bow or stern locked in, then it's game over. In fact, out of all of our matchups, 2/3 of the time, the result ended with the Albatross being sunk, and it struggles to perform well against ships at level 6 or higher. But where it got interesting is when we decided to flee rather than fight. One of the outputs Battle Simulator provides us is the average time it takes a ship to sink you. The average time it took a ship to sink this one in a dedicated combat scenario was 7 minutes, and that is with an average gunnery crew and a hit ratio of about 80%. It's an average, so some ships will be better and some ships will be worse against the Albatross, but it has an enormous amount of hull points, which is its biggest advantage in combat. Now consider the triangle trade route, which I assume is what most of you will be using this ship for. And on its longest leg, that's the Harrisburg to Nassau leg, depending on your navigation skills, takes you around 8 minutes, maybe 9, 10 if you do a lot of maneuvering. That means in order for a ship to sink you before you get to your destination, they would have to intercept you on the first third of your journey. Going from Harrisburg to Nassau, that would be around here. On some legs of the triangle trade, interception with the goal of sinking you is actually impossible, such as the Salem to Harrisburg route, which if you get intercepted and someone is shooting at you, just divert to Werner and sell your cargo there before you're sunk. This gets even more complicated when you consider that ships with large enough broadsides to truly threaten you are usually slower than you as well. The example is the Corsair, which on paper needs 4 minutes to sink you with a broadside, but it has to move parallel to you in order to accomplish this, and you're faster than a Corsair. So if you just keep following the wind, in reality it can only use its chasers, and it's going to take a lot longer for them to sink you. But with that in mind, what ship can sink an Albatross on this leg of the journey? And this is probably one of the few instances where we will ever say this, but the Hook is actually the one ship you actually need to worry about. If it intercepts you properly, it takes about 3 minutes to sink you, giving it the best chance of all the pirate ships to actually do something as it chases you behind the island of Whitecrest. But even so, the other legs will still be challenging even for the Hook, unless you decide to turn and engage your opponents. This is yet another area where the Camel outperforms the Albatross. It has a heavy broadside and high stern guns, which make it ideal for combat-oriented settings. If you are intending to take one of these two level 16 ships out into combat, the Camel is the one you should be buying. But what does that all mean? Well, while this ship does very well in defending itself, it still receives a D rating in combat. Its good performance in this category is owed to its ability to outrun and outmaneuver its opponents, but anytime we forced it to go head-to-head against another combat ship, the results were more often than not a loss. And if combat is your goal, buy the Camel. It may not be the best combat ship available, but it can certainly hold its own. And finally, we come to trade performance. When the ship was first released, an important change happened that affected the entire cargo trading landscape of Tradelands. Most of the dedicated trade ships in the game had their cargo capacities updated. This is an important change because it impacted a mechanic called trade velocity. This is the amount of money a ship can make selling cargo over the time it takes to sell that cargo. On our website, we have a list of the trade ships in Tradelands and their current trade velocities. Running through the middle of this chart is a profitability line. Ships that are below this line are typically not considered profitable, because it means that there is another ship available to you that can make more money. And ships above this line are considered profitable and can be used for trading. But then, at the top, creating a sort of curve, which we call the trading curve, is the most profitable ships at each level. Ships that appear on or near this line are your dedicated trade ships. If you are strictly operating as a cargo trader, then these are the ones that you want to build. The Dart, Marlin, Beaver, and Mule are all classic examples that fall along this progression line. Once you hit level 10, the trading curve begins to level out, owing to an invisible cap on how much money you can make in cargo trading. This is meant to prevent players from getting too far ahead of others and keeping the game somewhat competitive. Prior to the release of the Albatross, nearly every dedicated trade ship from level 10 onwards was capped at around 50,000 doubloons earned per hour maximum. This meant that for 6 months, the level 10 Grouse sat alone as the most profitable ship in Tradelands, owing to the fact that it was the earliest in-game ship you could buy, it had high trade velocity, low cost, and very good defensive capability. However, the release changed the values of these ships. The Grouse was reduced to 20 cargo instead of 22, and then of course the release of the Albatross. And now the chart looks like this. This normalization of all the best trade ships in the game is right in line with the trading curve. The Grouse has lost its superior position as a trade ship, and it was really above the trading curve prior to this update, and it improves the performance of lower tier trade ships, even allowing the Mule and the Camel to regain their legacy A tier ratings respectively. But this change would only last until a few minutes later, when the newest addition to this chart was built in game, and that of course is the Albatross, and it shows up right here. The first ship to break through this invisible barrier that has so far limited how profitable ships can be in Tradelands. Rather than rehash a test that we know has already been done by another player, we actually want to call out the excellent work done by Jolly Crossbones and his side-by-side comparison of the Demeter and the Albatross. We like how he conducted his statistical analysis and how he follows many of the same principles that we do, limiting the number of anomalous factors that would impact his results, using the same method to trade when he's comparing the two ships, and focusing only on one specific measurement, in this case, his trade velocity, or profitability per hour. While the total net doubloons earned in his run was different than ours, the end result was the same. The Albatross nets about 5% more per hour when compared to the series or the Demeter. Next in line would be the Camel and the Mule, and the results are as much as 10% higher than these two ships, and against the level 10 trade ships it's over 20% higher than the dedicated trade ships available at that level. At a total cost of around 1 million doubloons in materials, the total cost of the Albatross is the same as the Camel. This ship is actually decently priced, especially if you didn't buy the Mule when it was first available to you and instead decided to wait it out and keep trading in the Grouse for 4 more levels. That's because while the Albatross was touted as a side grade to the Camel, it's actually the direct upgrade from the Grouse. When directly compared to the Grouse, it has the same speed, but better hull points, better crosswind performance, and a higher cargo capacity, which means it's a better version. However, when the Grouse cargo capacity was reduced to 20, it gave players a reason to build the Mule again, because it was once again a good upgrade option at level 12. So, while the Albatross is an upgrade from the Grouse, the real question is if upgrading from the Mule to the Albatross is a good move. For that, let's look at the profitability over time of these two ships. The Mule has a trade velocity of around 44.5 thousand per hour. The Albatross has a trade velocity of around 48,000. The routes you take will make a difference here, but we aren't focusing on trade routes just yet. Let's just use these two numbers as our base for comparison. In option 1, you build the Albatross, which costs you 960,000 in doubloons and materials to build. That means you will effectively pay off your ship somewhere between 20 to 21 hours of trading. In option 2, if you had kept the Mule and traded for those 20 hours instead of purchasing the Albatross, then it would take you 263 hours of trading before you would effectively have made more money in the Albatross than you would with the Mule in the same time frame. Now it's up to you, the player, if you think you will be spending 260 hours trading. If you think you will, then the Albatross is absolutely a ship you should get, but really you're gambling on the future here. It's possible that by the time you hit 260 hours of trading, a new and even better trade ship would be added to the game, And if that happens, you may find yourself wishing you had waited to get that one instead of spending your money on the Albatross. While the future is hard to predict, the question we can answer now is what ship is the most profitable today? And let's just settle that point right now. The Albatross is the most profitable ship in the game, and by a decent margin. In the Triangle Trade route, we are able to get a TV of around 54,000 per hour. The top 5 trade ships of this route are now the Albatross, Camel, Ceres, Demeter, and Mule, with the Camel giving a close chase at 52,000 doubloons earned per hour. If you have only just enough money to buy one of these ships, that's where it starts to get a little tricky. The Camel is a better all-around ship, but if you are going to do only trade runs and only the Triangle Trade, then you actually want to do it with an Albatross. Unlike the Ceres, which had an extremely hefty price tag, only to come in 3rd place on this side-by-side comparison, which was a total waste of money, the Albatross can earn back its cost at a healthy 20 hours. That's something completely within the realm of possibility, and I'd go so far as to say you will almost certainly use this ship for at least 20 hours of trade running. Now that the Grouse and its ridiculously quick payback time is no longer in the top 5 category for trade velocities, the Albatross becomes the next best choice. The only thing that factors against it is the fact that other professions are available to players at this point in the game, namely mining and timber felling, which have a higher return and will likely be your go-to profession if money making is your goal. But once you've hit your resource count, trade running is a good secondary choice, and the Albatross will be your go-to option for that. Moreover, the other very important consideration is that if you are intending to level up to eventually get a Ceres at level 24, then cargo running is the most effective way to do that, and that means you need a good trade ship. Whatever ship you build at level 16, you will most likely use it for the next 8 levels. If you ended up purchasing the Albatross, you will have paid it off and have enough to afford the Ceres once you hit level 24. But once you get there, you might be wondering if you should build the Ceres. After all, this isn't a decision like the Camel versus the Ceres, where the difference was nominal enough that it could go either way. In the Albatross's case, it is definitely the superior trader, and that might make you have some regrets if you had your eyes set on buying something else that was more expensive, but you waited to purchase the Ceres instead. And because of that, it means the Albatross has managed to do exactly what it promises to do, to outperform all of the trade ships in Tradelands, for the time being at least. It's likely that new ships will be coming soon, and one of them might just raise the bar even further. But when it does, we can all remember that it was the Albatross that first broke through this trade velocity barrier, an honor that no other ship can ever take away from it. And with that, we rate this as an A- on our ship rating scale. It's a recognition that this is in fact a good ship to build at level 16, a better choice than the Camel if you are strictly interested in trading. But it doesn't provide the game-changing bump in trade velocity that you'll get with other ships like the Marlin and the Beaver, which once built can immediately double your trade velocity. But the Albatross is still the go-to ship for in-game trading, and it's likely that the Albatross will soon displace all of the Ceres and Demeter traders that are on the Triangle Trade in the future. And with that, we come to the conclusion of our review. Many of us who own the Camel will actually be driving a version of the ship from the past era when it was the king of the seas. If ever you pass one that has a pine or spruce deck, this was most likely a ship that was built during this bygone era, but the version available today is not the same one as it was in this previous Age of Sail in Tradelands. It has been stuck in a world where the Grouse competes against it, and even now as the Grouse has been finally outpaced as the top trade ship in Tradelands, the Camel is forced to compete again with its new contender, the Albatross. The addition of the Albatross all but assures that the Camel will never regain its once S-tier rating, but it is still the ideal upgrade for the Mule, whereas the Albatross is the right upgrade for the Grouse, a reflection of her captain's choice to either create the best trade ship in Tradelands or the best all-round ships in Tradelands. But if the Albatross was the ship you choose, then enjoy it for as long as it lasts. It is likely perfectly positioned in its current role, meaning it's not likely to experience a nerf to its cargo capacity in the way that we saw with the Grouse. The real threat to this ship will be the future additions of other more powerful trade ships in the future. So get out there and trade in it before that happens, and let the world know that you are striving to become one of Tradelands' wealthiest merchants.